Business analyst and host of Business Redefined, which airs on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. on NTV, Julians Amboko, also very, very active on X, is our guest. Julians, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Glad to be here, finally.
Yes, it's been a long time coming.
You've been on your way here for a while. For
and
3 months
we've arrived. Finally we've arrived.
Finally here. So we want to look at from where you sit as a business analyst and from engaging with the people as a journalist as well, whether you see there is an understanding by our leadership of the issues that people keep raising all the time, whether it's ordinary citizens, whether it's businesses in various sectors and so on. But first, Janet is going to give you the day's quote. Jano, where is it from today?
It's from Zimbabwe. For a minute, I was like, we've had Julians here before, because we see him often in the office. So I was trying to reconcile what was happening in Zimbabwe in 2018, just like a sentence or two. Zimbabwe had just transitioned from Robert Mugabe's decades-long rule. So it was the first post-Mugabe elections. And then tension arose, and in fact, 6 people lost their lives. And I think that's where this quote was born from. Amid those tensions, a youth organizer said, we're not fighting for a perfect country. We're fighting so that our children don't have to. Yeah. You're very passionate about fatherhood.
Yes, absolutely.
How does that quote resonate with you? You think about children, and we're not fighting for a perfect country. We're fighting so our children don't have to.
I think it just speaks to the fact that we are all scouting for a society whereby our children will have a fair chance at life. And there are many setbacks, especially if you look at the environment as it is right now. But if you look at a day like yesterday, and the protest that we saw, it is basically the ordinary citizen saying, we still believe we can have a better country. And especially from a management and public finance management standpoint, because finally when all is said and done, I think it boils down to what we are spending on and what our priorities are. And that's why we are where we are.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
There's palpable anger. There are those who could argue in some parts of the country. And there are those who could argue across the country. When the national leadership was in Kilifi yesterday, the president, the former prime minister, and his brother, they spoke, and they said, people just need to understand that 2027 is the next time there's going to be an election. That, all this, they reduced all what we are seeing into politics around an election. Those who are out in the streets and those who've been commenting, some and many of them have actually been saying it's about the economy and the pain that we are feeling. Where do you see those two conversations sitting?
So I think there's a lot of contextual setting to be done here. I don't think this is just something which you can relegate to 2027. The reason being that if you look at the data, and KNBS always puts out this on an annual basis, the average Kenyan has been grappling with contracting real wages over the last 5 or 6 years. That simply means that in our households, we have less spending power, we have less ability to meet the needs, the day-to-day basic needs of our households. And this is a reality which many of us are facing. And we are asking ourselves, is there a way in which you can make this a better environment for all of us? And I think that is what yesterday was all about. And if you try and put this together with what we saw in the supplementary budget coming to the floor of the House yesterday, what is always being cut is development spending. And that's a huge problem. Because if you look at the numbers that came out, for instance, in Supplementary Budget 3, something like basic education is earmarked for a further cut. Something like medical services is earmarked for another cut. And this now feeds into the frustration that the average Kenyan is facing. Because these are essential social services. We are not getting what we anticipated from a social welfare standpoint. And if you're asking us to think about 2027, yet even tomorrow we are not sure we will have our basic needs. There's a problem there. There's a disconnect between the leadership and what it's saying and what is resonating on the ground.
In fact, that's the... Oh, I was going to say, you want to go ahead?
No.
Okay, I was going to say that was my follow-up question, was trying to... I'm asking you, what are the 1 or 2, maybe 3 significant changes in this supplementary budget, and what does it say about government priorities? Because you just mentioned, if people are trying to literally survive. So maybe you could speak to that.
But can we do what is a supplementary?
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, let's rein it in. Let's take it a little bit back.
Because I think we understand, we've got an understanding of the budget process over the last few years, which is great. But then we're like, a supplementary budget, what's happening? So yes, and the third one of this financial year, what's happening?
Where have we been?
So let's take a step back. If you go to Article 223 of the Constitution, it provides for supplementary appropriation, which means that in the typical drafting of the budget, there could be emerging issues which were not foreseen, which then we need to appropriate or allocate money for. So that is where supplementary budgets come from. If you go to Section 39 of the PFM Act, the Public Finance Management Act, it then provides that Parliament will sit and consider such as they emerge. So there is nothing unusual about a supplementary budget. This year is unique in the sense that we have had 3 supplementary budgets. The last time we were in this situation with 3 supplementary budgets was the financial year 2019-2020. And that year we had 3 supplementary budgets because this was COVID time. There was so much adjustment being done every so often. Now this year, what happened was 2 things came into play. One is that Kenya's program with the IMF collapsed in March. That collapse of that program meant that about 103 billion shillings worth of funding, which should have come, did not come.
How much?
103 billion shillings. The second thing that happened was Kenya was expecting a loan from the World Bank. It's called the DPO, Development Policy Operation, $750 million. It never came up to this point. So already on the revenue side, you can see the pressures you're having. On the expenditure side, there are what we call unfunded requests. Unfunded requests simply means state departments went to Parliament and told them, we need this money, but it wasn't granted. So by the time we were doing supplementary budget 2, there was a backlog of unfunded requests coming especially from education, and you've had the conversation around examinations and capitation, etc. And the other one was from health, because there was this transition to SHIF, and there was a bit of realignment being done. So already there were indicators, we shall have a supplementary budget 3. The question was, when? It has delayed to the very tail end of the financial year, because the Treasury was expecting in early June the World Bank board would have sat and disbursed the loan, which I talked about. It didn't happen. And that is why we are seeing a supplementary budget being passed by Parliament 4 days to the close of the financial year. But I should add here, a supplementary budget is basically rather a regularization. So that money has already been spent. We are regularizing it through the official, through the laid out processes in the legislature.
It's been spent. Where does it come from to be spent, given that it was not part of our initial budget?
It comes from what we call the consolidated fund, where the pot for all the money. Remember, if you look at the legal architecture around the budgeting, you are allowed to spend up to 10% above, provided you will regularize it via the supplementary budget. So that's what happens.
Is there anything we should be nervous or worried about?
For the first time, and I've been covering the budget cycle for quite a while, we didn't have the estimates being remitted to the respective committee of the houses. So you know there are various committees, agriculture, health, etc., etc. So typically when the estimates come from Treasury, they are committed to these committees, they consider them, and then now they sit with the Budget and Appropriations Committee. This time that did not happen. So what happened was the Budget and Appropriations Committee, because of the time limit we have to the close of the financial year, simply called the chairman of the various committees, and they had a conversation around what spending pressures are emerging. That raises questions around the procedural aspect of it. And this even emerged on the floor of the House yesterday. So that is one issue which really stood out to me. I think also the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, we are again cutting development spending. Development spending for this financial year is about 550 billion shillings. If you want to know how small that is just as much as we have in what we call tax expenditures, how much you normally forego through the incentives and what have you that you have given investors. So our development spending is already very small. So if you keep on cutting it and increasing recurrent spending, there's a problem. Because the PFM Act, the Public Finance Management Act, prescribes that in any given year, a certain threshold, 30%, should be designated for development. And we are struggling with that.
And that is an at least.
Yes. Yeah. At the bare minimum.
At
the bare minimum.
least.
Yeah. It doesn't say that is how much you should.
Exactly.
Basically, at the very least, you should spend 30%. You know, all this is worrying for one reason. Last year, there were two, from my understanding of issues, there were two things that made people spark and blow a fuse.
Yeah.
One was how the government was spending the money they were giving it, by our taxes, and that's what they were talking about. The opulence, the open show of opulence, and yet I'm still paying for my hospital and my education and all. And then the second bit is that the government was coming for more money from the same taxpayers. So taxpayers were like, "Tusizoeane, my friend." The call for more money was retracted in June. And that made also the government to reduce how much it was proposing to spend.
Yeah.
Right? How much did they agree on at the very end? The budget at the beginning of the financial year, 2024, 2025.
We were at 3.995 trillion at the very start in June.
3.995 trillion.
Yes.
How much are we closing at?
4.042 trillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the issue? That people are concerned about how you're spending money, and you're spending it on all these other issues, and saying, in fact, cut back on your expenditure. And the government coming out, and even the president saying, yes, we are going to cut back on our expenditure. We are calling it, what was the term?
It was called fiscal rationalization.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay. And here we are at the end of the year, and the government is coming to tell Parliament, oh, by the way, we spent more money, we just sign. Because that's what happened with the supplementary budget free. They were coming to tell parliamentarians, we have spent more money. Wajua mambo imehappen, wajua. Approve it. Just sign that we have spent it. And yet, all these leaders, those in the National Assembly, in the Senate, and in the executive, are not connecting that to the public anger that's coming out. What's going on? What could be the cause of this?
Good question, Latif. So
how come hundreds of people be out of touch with reality at the same time?
The thing is, and I put this out sometime last week when we were having 2 weeks ago, I think, the budget. The financial year 2025-2026, which starts on July 1st, is a financial year that calls for adults in the room because we are not in a very good fiscal space. And here is why. If you look at our budget, give or take, we are raising about 2.4 trillion shillings in revenue. 1.2 trillion shillings is going to debt service. So already half of it has already gone. If you consider the public sector wage bill, is about 900 billion shillings. So say another trillion has gone. If you think about, we haven't discussed development, we haven't discussed education, we haven't discussed healthcare. I think we need to call ourselves to the room and ask ourselves what exactly is happening. If you look at Supplementary Budget 3, and I did this analysis and there was so much uproar online, the biggest percentage gain from Supplementary Budget 2 is an allocation to State House. And Treasury's reasoning is maintenance and all other things happening.
And domestic travel.
So from a prioritization standpoint, we clearly have a problem. We clearly have a problem because you can see a lot of social spending with unfunded requests. But here we are appropriating a sizable amount because the increase to the state is about 3 billion shillings, which is not pocket change.
An extra 3 billion shillings.
Exactly.
To go into.
So you ask yourself, even Parliament, because Parliament, the Treasury, as part of the executive, makes proposals. The reason why Parliament exists is to create a check and balance system to what's coming. So we need to ask ourselves about the people we take to Parliament and whether they are actually performing the role of appropriation rightly.
Eric has said that quite often. He has exhaled about Parliament.
That's a big problem.
It's not the physical building.
Yeah, but the people in it. What are the ripple effects? I know that's a big question, but I always think about, these are the numbers, this is how much we're squeezed. Talk to us about what that looks like years from now, just either by analysis, either by something that, a projection that perhaps has been seen before, but just the ripple effects of cutting down, for example, the development budget.
I look at it from a trade-off standpoint. Whatever you decide to do, there is something you're foregoing to do. If you are increasing allocation to State House, and we are seeing you're cutting on basic education, you're cutting on medical services, and this is coming at a time when the average Kenyan spends about 60% of their healthcare spending out of pocket. Out of pocket. It means they basically go to hospital, they have no source of cover, and they will go back to their pocket to be able to pay this. There's a problem there. There's a disconnect in terms of how you connect your public financing priorities. And if you bring this within the context of what we are discussing right now, we are in the budget cycle. We have seen the proposals coming via finance bill, which, by the way, should be signed by 30th of June to kick off on July 1st.
And today is the last day for Parliament to
Parliament is going in recess, by the way. So I'm actually told the signing should be happening sometime tomorrow morning. But the thing is, if you're telling us that you're cutting back on something like animal feeds, because up till now they were VAT zero rated, value-added tax, they should now be changed from that status because you want to raise more revenue. But your spending doesn't speak to the realities of tightening your belt. There's a problem there. We need a broader discussion as a country around where we sit in a fiscal sense. Does it speak to the day-to-day needs of the average Kenyan? And what are we doing about it?
I'd love to figure out if by some miracle someone actually decided to work that way, how to do it. But before that, this is Supplementary Budget 3. What did we spend 1 and 2 on?
So it's basically the same expenditure. If you look at the budget and you disaggregate it across state departments, they're the same. All that normally happens is a tweak around the allocations. So if you look at, for instance, Supplementary Budget 3, one of the huge allocations is going to the State Department for Senior Citizens and Social Welfare. And it tells you we've had a bit of liquidity squeeze, or rather lack of cash around the Inua Jamii program. So they're trying to address that. Another one that stood out to me is that we're seeing a lot of allocation going towards security and NIS. If you look at Supplementary Budget 3, Treasury, we can give a breakdown in terms of what exactly that is for. So it's a realignment. Basically, you are cutting here, you're adding there. And
I always call supplementary budgets mischief. Okay? Because here is a government goes to the National Assembly, to Parliament, and says, this is my policy for expenditures in the next financial year. This is how much I intend to spend. And these are the areas that I intend to fund. And this is how I intend to raise that money. Do you approve? Parliament approves. Okay? Appropriations bill is passed, which is that budget, item per item, lipa Janet, pesa fulani, ya kwenda Mombasa, like that. It's line item. Once it has been approved, you've been told, you said this is how you want to spend. We have agreed that cut back here, spend this. Go and start spending. And then you come back 2 months later, 3 months later, and say, oh, by the way, I'd like to amend this budget. In fact, I've already amended. I'd like you to approve the amendment that I already moved money from Janet's transport to Mombasa, and I bought Mariam tea yesterday. So please approve. Mischief.
No, but
then you come twice, you come 3 times, and you're removing money from here and there. I call that mischief.
But Eric, the underlying issue here is, and we've raised this before, and I was appearing before the Finance and Planning Committee on the Finance Bill submissions. Treasury, by and large, has a problem with expenditure and revenue forecasting. I think it's an open secret. Which is why, in the current financial year, the targeted revenue target has been revised downwards 3 times.
We're at what now?
3 times. So right now we're targeting about 2.40 trillion.
Which is the same as last year, more or less.
But it just tells you, you keep on projecting and you miss them and you want to come back and adjust them downwards. As we speak, in the first 10 months of the current financial year, that is FY 24-25, we missed revenue targets, and I mean cumulative revenue targets, by 253 billion shillings. If you want to know how large that is, our monthly average tax revenue collection is about 180 billion shillings. So 253 means you've missed it by quite a mark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a forecasting problem, and we have made this very clear to National Treasury. I just hope in 25-26 it will be adjusted.
Is it a forecasting problem in terms of the capacity, or is it
that we just don't want?
If you keep your revenue projections realistic, then that means your budget would also have to align to those revenue projections. So then, it's easier to overshoot so that your budget can now be bloated and you have all these extra monies, and then come back and say, oops, we didn't collect enough.
Remember, even if we didn't have that, we have the fundamental problem from where I sit with where we are right now is that we have run fiscal deficits, shortfalls between expenditure and revenue in the hundreds of billions for a decade. At some point, this thing will catch up with you. And that's where we are right now. It's basically catching up with us. So you're in an environment where your IMF program collapsed because IMF told you, look, you guys are not serious. You keep making commitments on revenue targets and expenditure rationalization, and you just don't do it. So now you have applied for a successor program. Yes. So now you're in a situation where they have cut their program. World Bank has cut their funding.
Right.
You are asking yourself, tax revenue is not meeting targets. If you go to the domestic market with borrowing, you will create a problem because the interest rates will again shoot up significantly. And that's where we are.
Let's equals MC squared. E is equals MC squared here. Mischief.
Let's hold that thought because we're going into a break and come back. There's something you want to speak to.
Because even with that fiscal deficit as is, if we were realistic with our revenue projections, it would be much bigger and much more alarming. So that's why it's easier to over-project for them.
Mischief.
I think.
Mischief. And a few minutes to 7:30. We're back in a moment.
Yep, welcome back. We're having a conversation just linking the public anger, discontent to public finance management, to government expenditure. Julians Amboko, host of Business Redefined, which airs on Tuesdays on NTV, 7:30 p.m. He's our guest. He's a financial analyst, and he's very big on just tracking what the government is doing in terms of spending. So he has told us that as we were out in the streets yesterday and talking about all these things, Parliament was regularizing an extra expenditure by government. It's called the Supplementary Budget. So Supplementary Budget 3. This is the third time that the government has come to Parliament to say, oh, by the way, we've spent extra money. We have moved money from here to there, sign. And yesterday Parliament signed again. And the impact of that is an extra 3 billion shillings has gone to State House and so on and so forth. How much has been removed from the education sector?
I did my math about 1 billion shillings.
1 billion shillings has come from education. How much from health?
I'll need to check that again.
Okay, but some money has come from health.
Medical services.
Not gone to health. Okay, come out.
You remember we did the math for how much it cost to build State House, and we adjusted for inflation, and it came to just about 3 billion shillings. So we've spent the cost of building State House on renovations.
Something like that. Okay. And if you think about it, so here's the connection. So let's talk about healthcare. The primary healthcare is funded directly from the exchequer.
Correct.
Right? How much has been allocated in the next financial year? Approximately.
I need to go, because what happens is they're in State Department. So there's medical services, then there's professional services. Ballpark figure normally comes to about 30 billion.
It's about 30 B.
Yeah.
Okay. But that is funding everything.
Yes.
But then there's the money that was going into specifically for the primary healthcare services, the primary healthcare fund. So that if you go to your local dispensary and health center, you get treated, you go back home, you don't spend a shilling.
Right.
Medicine is there, all the medical supplies are there, you just go back home. Even in some levels, some level 4s, you go back home. If you are battling a chronic illness, it's also funded from the Chronic Illness Fund. Last year, I think it was about 10 billion shillings or 8 billion shillings that had gone into this, and there was a request. So I'm just trying to connect. When you put an extra, because this is extra, an extra 3 billion shillings into State House, State House ends up spending how much this year?
This year, so they were at about 4B at Supplementary Budget 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
So plus 3.
Yes.
So 7 billion shillings in 1 year in State House. And for all Kenyan citizens, millions of them going to a level 2, level 3 facility, let's say about 8 billion shillings. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
And you go back home because, well, there are delays in disbursements and so on and so forth. That's where the public anger comes from.
Yeah.
Because you are still battling your own issues, and you can see money going into fueling, transport, renovations, changing black tiles to white tiles in Karen, and so on and so forth. And you just get pissed off.
Yeah, you do.
This is where the public anger comes from. And when people are out there on the streets yesterday, and I know, Jackson, we're going to play the clip of President Ruto and Raila Odinga at some point, and their response to what is happening in the country is, are they or are they not tone deaf?
Oh, we are aware they're very tone deaf. It's the why. It's the incessant nature of being tone deaf that's very jarring. It's almost like, is this a social experiment, sir? Because I know you can read the room. And so I was going to ask a question, but I've probably answered it already through this conversation, which is whether there's any sort of like commitment to fiscal consolidation, because we have to think about how we're going to get out of this, the rut that we're in. Whether you sense that, but I feel like the answer is already no. Do you get a sense that there's any smidgen of commitment towards
not at the moment,
consolidation?
honestly, not at the moment, because if you look at, for example, Supplementary Budget 3, which is increasing expenditure by about 35 billion shillings in total, the bulk of which is going to recurrent spending. And it doesn't speak to the fact that every other Kenyan is being told to tighten their belts.
Right.
Except when we talk about public finance and the government's expenditure. And fiscal consolidation is one issue where the government had really made commitments in the just concluded IMF program. And part of the reason why the program collapsed is because we just never met the commitments. So right now we're in a situation whereby your external financing is severely squeezed. As I spoke about the issue of the IMF program and the World Bank. Domestic financing is equally squeezed because tax revenue is falling behind target. And so we're in an environment where unless we really come through line by line item of our expenditure, and this is why we should stop doing lip service to the discussion around zero-based budgeting. Because zero-based budgeting means essentially I come and tell Eric, if this is your expenditure for the next financial year, justify line by line. Don't come and tell me this financial year I spent $1 billion shillings. Next one, I'm factoring in inflation and adjusting it by this much. No. Let's go line by line. Let's find a justification for each. Where there is none, let's do away with it. And that's all Kenyans are asking for. Let's do away with it, because there's a lot of fiscal slippage and wastage
that goes on there
when many Kenyans have.
I know we're about to run these clips. When we come back, I really want to hear from you, Julians. Just speaking on that same tangent, what an initial first step towards fiscal consolidation would look like.
I was going to do that. I was going to call it Julian's budget.
Julian's budget.
So, when we come back, Julians, you collect the same 2.4 trillion that the government is hoping to collect in this year. Your debt commitments are the same. Your country is the same number of people, and nothing has changed. How does Julian spend 2.4 trillion?
Sure.
Let's have a look at who was speaking, actually?
It's President William Ruto.
Yes.
Basically, let me put it this way. The political leader of the majority in parliament is the leader of UDA, William Ruto. The political leader of the minority in parliament is the leader of ODM, Raila Odinga. Okay? When parliament is behaving the way it's behaving, their political leaders are thinking this way. Listen to what they were saying yesterday about the demonstrations and the protests happening across the country. Here's what their response to it.
Wale wako na maoni tofauti. Hata wakati wa maandamano, pia tuhakikishe ya kwamba maandamano yale yasiwe ya fujo, yasiwe ya kuharibu mali, yasiwe ya kuharibu amani katika taifa letu la Kenya, kwa sababu hatuna taifa lingine ambalo tutahamia mambo yakiharibika hapa. Sisi taifa letu la Kenya ndio hili, na ni nafasi yetu na ni wajibu wetu.
Kama uchaguzi imekwisha, tutarudi. Tunangoja mpaka tena uchaguzi mwingine ikuje. alafu jitokeze, fanya kampeni vile inafanyika katika nchi zingine, kusema wewe utatoka, wananchi ndio utatoa mtu nje, sio wewe. Wengine wako na shares kidogo, wengine hawana shares. Hiyo ni taifa gani? Na kama wewe una shares, mbona unatoa ushuru? Unatoza ushuru sababu gani kama wewe huna shares? Hiyo tutasema hii ni mambo ya ujinga. Moja, kuna tofauti ya kisiasa, ya kisera, hiyo ni sawa. Tuwe na tofauti ya kisera, lakini ikifika mambo ya kujenga taifa la Kenya, tuwe kama kitu kimoja.
Their understanding of what's happening around the country is that there's somebody who wants their cake. Na huyo mtu anafanya ngoje. That's it.
Ngoje uchaguzi.
Hiyo ni ujinga. Is it ujinga that you actually don't get it, what people are saying?
Yeah.
Like here you are, you're saying everybody here is talking about economically constrained. All the data that's coming to you from agencies in government is showing you that people's incomes are reducing.
Yeah.
And they are having tighter problems.
Yeah.
And they are coming out on the streets and talking about that. But you come back and say, huyu ni mtu anataka kiti huyo.
I think it's the Marie Antoinette syndrome. I think that's firmly where it is. When you've been in a glass house long enough, which I think the two who've just spoken have been, more and more there's a disconnect with reality. Because you can see, but you're in this beautifully shaped crystal house, and but guys, there's cake.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're panicking.
You're
About
detached from
bread.
it.
Yeah, it's the more I hear, then
Why
the more
would you
I'm
want
like,
bread
why
when,
would you want bread?
when you have cake?
There's cake.
Like,
I mean,
what's
why
wrong?
are you starving? I'm confused. There's cake. I think more and more we're seeing that. But let's go back to Julian's budget.
Yes, so what will my budget look like? If you read the PFM Act, the first and mandatory checkoffs from the consolidated fund, these ones you don't negotiate. Debt service and pension liabilities. So those ones, you set them aside. But there is one question which I always ask. If you read the law, it prescribes that we should never have our public sector wage bill at more than 35% of our revenues. It's very clear, it's stipulated in the PFM architecture, public finance management. We are at 45. So we are flying way above the prescribed threshold. Can we have a conversation, because we are spending about R1 trillion annually in that public sector wage bill? Can an audit be done? And the reason why in the Collapse IMF program, one of the prescribed measures was you need a unified payroll system, because you basically have no visibility, or rather, you have obscured visibility as to whom you're compensating, how much you're compensating, how much fraud there is in the public sector payroll. So for me, that is a very critical starting point. That 35% was not put there by mistake. It was based on global best practice of what the public sector wage bill typically
Should be.
So for me, that's a starting point. And then we now look at the development side. If we are saying that every supplementary budget, we have always seen that the casualty...
Sorry, Julians, quick one. Does debt payment go under public wage debt?
No.
Okay.
So that is basically paid out of the consolidated fund,
Okay.
direct.
First charge.
Yeah.
First charge, gone.
First charge, gone.
Aye, that's
Yes.
gone.
Then the conversation around development spending. If we have seen recurrently it is the casualty whenever we have a supplementary budget, is there a way to safeguard it? Can we prescribe that it shouldn't be below X percentage of your spending in a given financial year? And that already is embedded in the law. When they tell you about the 30% of your spending should be at least focusing on development spending, there's a reason why it is there. So if you're tinkering around with the already prescribed thresholds, maybe that is the starting point. And then the rest can fall into place.
Right.
But I think we need to really look at what we're spending on the public sector wage bill, because report after report from the Office of the Auditor General has told us we have a problem here and we can clean it up. Yeah.
You know, on this issue of wage bill, there was a conference on wage bill. Was it last year?
We've had a number of them, actually. I think that was the fourth.
It's an annual conference.
Yes.
And in every conference, they haven't had one this year, right?
No.
in every conference they talk about, we need to look at how we can regularize and harmonize our wage bill, so we bring it down to below 35%, to 45, and so on and so forth. And the next thing, they're hiring more people. Okay? So, I don't know, Julians.
It's a willingness. It's a willingness issue. And to be fair to SRC, if you go back 5 years out, the ratio of the wage bill to revenue has actually been scaling down. But now we're at 45, and still we've been scaling down. So the question is, are we scaling down as fast as we should be, given the sort of constraints we are in right now? Because the truth is this: our resource envelope, or the money we raise, is really minimal, considering the needs.
We also have to change our politics, right? In changing our politics here, I mean, one of the reasons why people are not let go is, and also why people keep getting fired, is because of our politics.
Yeah.
There's a political price to pay if you get into office and you do not hire people. There's a political price to pay if you came in and you said you're firing people.
Yeah.
Serious political price to pay. And it's because we look at government as a place where you're going to get money.
Yeah.
I mean, today, if Mariam got appointed into government, everything else we've been talking about, advisors will be, hey, Mariam, congratulations. Mariam.
But that's changing now.
And I would be so shocked.
Mariam, congrats. Have you heard people telling someone, don't take that job?
Yes.
And then, no, not
Now
really.
more than ever.
Really?
Government job.
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't
Janet,
had
are you one of those who...
Not at a government gig.
No, not gig, a job.
A job,
Yes.
unemployment.
From June 25th last year, there are so many people who are offered, and they were told categorically, do not.
Viva.
That's not true.
Love
Very many. And some of them have been here, brilliant. Their community gathered around them and said, Skiza, ni pesa unataka fundraise for you.
Newsflash, Janet. There are people.
Yes, fair enough. On the other spectrum, who will take
at
it.
all times, who will just look at it and say, all right,
It's a
no,
job,
this one, I don't think I should take up this job. I don't think the reason they're not taking up is not because there is no pay or anything. It's just they're
Matter
thinking,
of principle.
Yeah. This particular ship, I don't want to board this ship. Okay.
It's sinking and
Yeah.
I don't
But if
like
another
water.
ship came, the 45% would not matter. They would board the ship and we'd be like, cheers, man.
Yeah.
You got the job.
Congrats. Yeah.
A critical mass of people
Yes.
are those that are looking for that opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying, collectively, we've got to change our politics.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because that is how we're going to be able to say, no. We need to reduce the number of people who are working. How many people are in communications in this particular office?
Yeah.
You saw when the deputy president was impeached, and the list that came out of all those people that were told, don't report to work tomorrow. Advisor, communication advisor, this and the other, support, you what, and you're asking yourself,
why are they all there?
But maybe, Latif, just to bring in something else, is that 4 years ago, this country had a conversation around a draft public sector allowances bill. Somewhere it just went quiet because the idea was, the problem with the public sector wage bill is fundamentally an allowances. Basic salary might be fine. But what people gobble up in allowances is atrocious.
Yes.
We need to ask ourselves where that proposal went and why it just went quiet.
we know where it went. Surely, that's where the money is.
Exactly.
In fact, cut us a salary.
Yeah.
His allowance. Fine.
They'll be fine.
That's where the problem is.
Yeah.
That's where, and we need that conversation to come back.
Comes back into, we've got a tortoise on a tree. Okay?
Yeah.
It is peeing on us, it's doing all those things. That tree is Parliament Road. We've got to look at how either we cut this tree completely and we just move, we decide.
Seems a bit extreme for one tortoise.
We do not want a shade.
Okay.
Or we remove that bloody thing.
Okay.
And make sure that we don't put another thing up there.
Yeah.
Because we are the ones who put that thing up there.
We are.
True.
If we continue the way we elect our leader, and I said it yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday?
It was the day before.
I like William Ruto, so I'm going to vote for William Ruto and give him people to support him. Kimani Ichung'wah is the political leader of the National Assembly. That guy is not beheaded on the citizens. That guy feels that he owes his job
To the
William
president.
Ruto.
Yeah.
All right. And it's because he knows if William Ruto chomoas me from this committee, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. Right?
Yeah.
It's because of how we have done it.
Yeah.
We did not elect, the people of Kikuyu elected him. Yes, you're a good person. Yes, but also because you're with Ruto.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they brought him back into parliament.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah. But you're with Ruto.
Yeah.
So we'll vote for you.
Yeah.
We need to separate that
Yeah.
and elect somebody as a legislator because they understand the job, and because they know that they owe it to us.
Right. And I think the point you're raising is good because it still feeds in to this conversation. It starts there.
Yeah.
It starts at the people who are either pushing back or just saying, let us sign. Also, is there any public insights into this? I don't want to say participation because it sounds obvious, but I wish there was a way they could just publish summaries and let us understand what's happening. Do we have a right to ask for that?
You know, you raise a very good point, Janet, because when we had the June 24 protests and then the budget which had been passed in June, we had a supplementary immediately after now, supplementary budget 1 for the current financial year. That was the first supplementary budget I have seen taken through public participation. And I thought it was the beginning of public participation for supplementary budgets. But clearly I had wrong expectations. But I wanted to say something else.
Yeah.
There's a second leg to what we're talking about from the legislature side. I have had the privilege of reading the budget speeches of this country from 1963 to date. There was a time in this country when finance ministers understood that their job was to balance budgets. If you read Mwai Kibaki's budget speeches as finance minister from 1969 to 1981, you can see a deliberate effort to balance this budget. Somewhere around the late 80s and into the 90s, we lost that. We need to get back to that. If you read David Mwiraria's first budget speech, 2003-04, there was a clear effort that we must balance our expenditure with our revenues. We need to go back to those finance ministers because they were there. They were there. And it's a delight, by the way, to read budget speeches from 63 because you see the evolution of Kenya's public finance. You see how things like value-added tax came up in 1990. You see how pay-as-you-earn came up in the 70s. So there's a lot of insight there, and I think we could do a lot in borrowing from that.
That's good to know. That's good context too.
I was actually going to ask him just about that. That one, I feel like right now we have a cabinet secretary for Treasury who does have a good understanding of, public finance, but I don't know about the rest of the house.
Right, yeah.
From your interactions, what is the understanding of public finance? Or is it like Eric said, I am indebted to the president, so if the party is voting yes, we vote yes? Or, when they're deliberating these things in parliament, are they going line by line and seeing that 1 + 1 = 2?
So the first thing to point out is that parliament functions through committees.
Yes.
And that is why we have the budget and appropriations, the finance and national planning, because the people designated in these committees are supposed to have a very good understanding of
public finance.
And when you engage with them, they actually
do.
They actually do. And this is why I always challenge Kenyans. If you don't read anything else, read the reports that come from the committees. Because when they go to the committee of the whole house, what the house will do is just endorse, by and large, endorse what the committee has suggested and what have you. Where I think there is a breakdown is the fact that the committees themselves take to the House recommendations which they know don't align from an expenditure standpoint. So you have this revenue shortfall already. But here you are pushing expenditure.
Right.
But if you ask the committees, as I do every so often, they will tell you, you will never have a parliamentarian come and tell you, don't give me that for the road in my constituency. They will always push for it.
So that's the thing.
So
the
back to the people we send
to
the House.
Right. Because they're meant to oversight.
Exactly.
And they should be
There's
saying.
a breakdown there.
It goes back to, yes, the people we send there, but also separating the legislature from any development matters, I think, because you're right. No one will say, give me less.
Give me less for the roads
less.
and what have you. Yes. Yeah,
so it's and it's an ongoing conversation that we've had here that legislators have absolutely no business managing any sort of finances. I don't know what your take on that is, but General Noel.
No, I was just going to say maybe that's their version of oversight, to accept that.
Oh.
If they're asked why they took the money for the roads, like I'm oversighting, making sure my constituency is growing.
They'll call it representation, which is part of their job.
This is true. Going to that third arm.
And they when they've come here, they've said,
people.
I am representing my people. That's why I'm close to the president, because I'm representing. No, they say
I want development.
I want development.
Yeah.
But what's your thought on that?
No, I think the legislature has a clear role when it comes to appropriation. What we need to do is to strengthen these committees. You will find a strong chairperson, a strong vice. When we make submissions, like when we were making on the virtual assets bill, at some point you'll ask yourself, am I speaking to myself? Or are we still together on these discussions? Yeah? I mean, with all due respect to my friend legislators. But I think there's a lot of capacity building to be done, to put it very mildly.
Okay.
Especially around public finance. And I understand, I mean, tax is not everyone's cup of tea. But if you're vested with the authority of deciding a country's tax policy,
you need to make it your business.
You've said a lot of really critical things this hour, Julians. If there's one thing you want people to take from this conversation, to take from the conversation about the supplementary budget, even as regards to if it's even possible to draw this parallel, with regards to everything that we're witnessing and seeing, what would that be? What's the one thing that you want people to take home about the supplementary budget that was passed, and just the one thing that you think is critical as we just grapple with the reality that a lot of people are uncertain of, or future that people are uncertain of?
Wow. And we have made a lot of effort around this as Nation Media Group to create visibility on this. Every time a financial year ends on June 30th, the next one starts on July 1st. At the end of July, or rather at mid-August, early September, you'll hear a call for sector working groups. That is where the budget, because the sectors submit their proposals, which will then come to committees, which will then be escalated. So the budget cycle starts immediately, another one ends. For many of us, we normally think, when we see finance bill, that's when it starts. By that time, you're already too late. There's little you can change
step,
at that
3 or 4 or 5.
If we start tracking it from the sector working groups, we'll have a better chance. Because when we see something like the Budget Review and Outlook paper coming out late this year and building on that, by the time you're seeing the budget policy statement in December, it tells you we are already fleshing out the estimates for the next financial year. And I think that is where, as Kenyans, we really need to come out strongly and ask, not just on the revenue side, but on the expenditure. By June 30th, which is sometime this week, the president should be signing the finance bill. And I'm sure we'll all be focusing there, but he'll also be signing the appropriations bill. Will we also do a line-by-line analysis of the same? Because our problem is on the expenditure side. So that would be my parting shot.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Like, pay attention. We have a lot of things grabbing our attention, but pay attention from the start.
Stay alert.
Stay alert.
Mahali tumefika, we have to. But then let's always remember, we created institutions that can stay alert for us, so we can have less alert. Parliament is one of them. How we elect people into that house matters. Okia Mtata, the senator for Busia, from Busia, is our next guest. He's here. He was on the streets yesterday, and he's been one of those people who've been advocating for very many things. We want to talk about what's happened, what's happening, and what's going on in the country. Keep it here for that. Julians Amboko, the host of Business Redefined, has been our guest for the last hour.
Asante.